G'day and welcome back to the Weedy garden. I woke up early this morning so I could be out at Zaytuna Farm to see the sunrise with Geoff Lawton, my permaculture teacher. In the last video, I asked you if you wanted to ask him any questions. So this morning I drove out to ask him as many of those questions as I could. And because I only had one microphone and one cameraman, I couldn't do all the things at once. So what I did is I asked him the questions, and so I'm going to tell you what the questions were here. And the first question from the Weedy Watchers was from Nikhil. And Nikhil, like many other people, are interested to know how you can make permaculture work and how you can absorb permaculture if you're a city dweller, if you live in a city, if you have a small space like he has of 300 square feet. Well, 300 square feet is about that size of my vegetable garden, and the diversity in my little vegetable garden in that section is the same as your backyard, Nikhil. And there's a little list of the things I got going. But let's ask Geoff and see what he said to that question.
Small spaces are the most productive per square metre. A lot of people don't realise that. It's just the intensity of interaction. So, one of our students in Melbourne produces the equivalent of 14 tonnes to the acre per square metre on 64 square metres. In that 64 square metres, right, there's 30 fruit trees, but they're pruned 4 times a year and they're crowded. So you get a variety of apples across the whole year because you've got so many varieties closely planted. But also there's 12 to 15 varieties of berries and 70 to 80 varieties of herbs and vegetables. So you get this incredible intensity and massive amounts of fertility in a small area. Now, it's not a lot of work. It actually works out to about 2 minutes per square metre. That's a lot of attention per square metre, but that only works out to 2 hours a week on 60 square metres. Very small amount of time, really, to get a massive amount of diversity and nutrition that's going to give you an incredibly vital health. So you're getting health, vitality, and all the minerals and nutrient you need. You just need calories often from somewhere else, the bulk food. That's often very achievable as an organic purchase. So don't worry about small space. That's all you really need to understand permaculture and put it into action.
Okay, so the next question was from Malcolm. Thanks for asking the question, Malcolm. And it's a good question because Malcolm's living in California, which is on the opposite side of the world to us, in the Bay Area in California. And his question was, if he's over there and he's looking for a plot of land, he's looking to find out where to buy it, he's looking to find out what sort of plants he should grow in his area, how does he get consultation from a permaculture teacher living on the other side of the world?
I do consultancy all over the world using the internet, LiDAR maps, mobile phone, laptop projection, digital projection up on whiteboards. But if you've done the course, you really understand the consultancy and you can apply it much better. We have teams everywhere that can help you. But the crucial thing is, do you understand how the design system works? Because that makes all the difference.
And remember, you can also contact your own tribe in your own area. Anyone that's done the PDC course, has their PDC, can also teach and design and consult. So look up your own tribe. There must be some permaculture groups in your area, for sure, no matter where you are. Just before I go any further, I just wanted to say that this is that little mango tree that I planted on my video number, was it 9 or 10 or so, just after I met Geoff Lawton. So we'll go on to the next question from Levy. My brother often tells me that permaculture is a nice idea for a garden, but just can't feed the world the way monoculture crops have been able to. What do you say to that common belief? What do you say, Geoff?
Permaculture can feed the world better than monoculture because it has the diversity, it has the healthier food, more nutrition. It does it in a way that repairs the world instead of destroying the world. Monoculture in the agricultural sense has been destroying the world for 7,000 years, and there's no point in regenerating an absolute failure. Permaculture feeds the world in a way that repairs the world and is beneficial to the world. We don't want to feed the world the way monoculture crops do. We can easily do it with more diversity, more nutrition, and a lot more health for the people and the environment.
So the next question is from Gavin. So he's kind of asking, how do you use permaculture when you're growing veggies that you pull out when they're finished growing?
When you're growing annual crops, whatever you take out has one edible component, and then the remainder goes back to the system. So there's a return cycle. Plus, you're adding organic matter from other parts of the system, compost and fertility continues.
The next question is from Jason Mason. And Jason Mason's asking, in a northern slope, in the northern hemisphere, on a degree that's less than 10 degrees, what would Geoff recommend doing there? If you want to know what that means, it means that if you've got a hill and you're in the northern hemisphere, the sun is coming up in the wintertime around the south. So the north facing wall is getting, the angle of the sun is coming in at a low angle, so it's not getting much sun. Okay, so what would you say to that, Geoff?
On a shady north slope in the northern hemisphere that's less than 10 degrees, you can put your tall species at the bottom and your bushy species in front, and then your smaller species higher up the slope. As long as the sun angle gets in, then you've got a solar arc, and that arc will allow you to grow anything you like on that slope.
I'm standing on my, what we call the southern slope, because I'm in the southern hemisphere, so this is my southern slope. The sun comes up here in the wintertime and goes down here, you see, so it's kind of cutting down the hill. So you want your big trees at the back and your smaller trees and your shrubs and your herbs at the front, which I explained on my Food Forest video. And that's because I learnt that from Geoff Lawton. Thanks, Geoff. Again, we're up on the Wormville Hill now, because the next question's about the worms, and especially if you're living in a colder climate. It's from Skippy's Hobby Homestead. G'day, Skippy. He's asking, he's living in the Midwest USA where it's cold, and the temperatures, they get down to the icy, like they do in Denmark where it's freezing cold. So Canada, anywhere north, anywhere real cold, what do you do with your worms in the wintertime?
With our worm farms in a cold climate, if it gets really frozen, then what we can do is we can move them indoors or inside a plastic house, glass house. We can also surround them by straw bales and put the straw bales right over the top, so they're kind of in a straw bale insulation. The worms may actually not make it, but the eggs will still be viable. So in the spring, it'll all come back to life with new baby worms.
Okay, moving right along. The next question from Nature Woman. Nature Woman, she writes that she's from East Gippsland and that they have strong winds up there with clay soil, and at the moment everything's saturated. Must have had a lot of rain. She'd like to have help in knowing how to better get the drainage and to also keep the couch grass out of the garden.
With clay soil that's not very well drained, come and have a look at this. This is pretty heavy soil here. What we've got is raised beds, wood chip in the footpath, and what's come out of the footpath is dug onto the raised bed. So the raised bed's actually the material from the footpath. Lots of mulch, and when you loosen that soil, a little bit of gypsum to actually like break up the clay. Once you get the raised bed and you get enough mulch, you can control the weeds and aim the growth towards the vegetables. Now also, you can use a cover crop. So you can put cover crop between the vegetables and on the clay. So here, all around, there's little plants of vetch. Vetch is a legume cover crop, a green manure. So this little feathery plant here is fixing nitrogen and breaking up the clay. So this is a great strategy. Living mulch and straw mulch and wood chip mulch in the footpaths breaks it all up and gives you that kind of production you see here. This is a brand new garden made in clay. You can see the clay soil pretty hard. So look at this, we've got pretty good production, quite a mixed vegetable garden, and it's all very new just because we treated it the right way.
The next question is from Bogna from Bulgaria. And she's asking Geoff if he doesn't mind just to comment on the upcoming solar minimum that's coming up in about 10 years. And is there anything we can do to prepare?
The universe is in a continuous pulse, and every 15 or so years we have a solar maximum, and in between we have a minimum. These cycles are things that we work with, and there's an advantage to understanding every 15 years we get these events.
The next question is from MC. And MC is asking about the swales. And she's asking, can your slope be too slopey? Is there like a limit on the grade of the hill before it's not a good idea to put swales on? If they're too deep, should you fill them up again or leave them?
Can you do swales too deep? Well, it depends. There are scales of swales. How big is your land? How steep is your land? And what climate are you in? Here in the subtropics, we've got a large swale here, going about 200 meters around the top of the property. And it is quite steep here, but it's not too steep. At about 18 to 20 degrees, it gets a little bit too steep, simply because the back cut gets so big. If we were in a large desert catchment, it could be 3 times this size, because in the desert, you have to save every single drop of rain once you get those big desert floods. So it just depends where you are. I like to make a swale big enough that my main implement fits in there. This is a small tractor swale, but if I was on a small property, it might come right down to a little ride-on mower or even a wheelbarrow. So I very rarely make a swale less than 60 centimeters across the base, because that's the minimum width of a wheelbarrow. It just depends where it fits.
Okay, another question from Cameroon. Cameroon's asking, how can I start a food forest in my backyard? Well, you could go and watch the video that I made about the food forest, because then you could see how I made mine and some things you need to think about. But it depends on where you are in the world and how big a spot you have and where it's facing, really, what you can plant and what you can grow. But I think Geoff could answer it more articulate than myself.
You can start a food forest in a small garden, and I advise you start with the trees that you like to eat the fruit most, and then build all your layers and make it nice and tight and secure. In fact, one tree with an assembly is a forest assembly, so there's no limit, and it's just a matter of your choice what you want to include.
Another question, this time it's from Michelle, and she's asking, can you make swales on flat land?
On flat land, swales work better than on steep land because there's a very shallow back cut, and with a mound higher than the back cut, you actually flood the area behind the swale. So you actually hold more water for less earthworks, and that way you've got a more efficient swale. Flat lands, love it.
JW is asking Geoff, what's some good support species for cooler, frosty climates, Geoff?
Here's a great cold climate legume. This is Albizia julibriescens. Now you also have laburnum and Siberian pea tree, but you also have all the Elaeagnus, which are not legumes, but they're nitrogen fixers, and the alder is a nitrogen fixer. And you can go onto this website and find lots of species that you can use specifically for cold climates.
Another question, this time it's from Anand. And Anand is asking, does soil degradation result in poorer quality food with less nutrients?
Degraded soil has less life, and it's the life in the soil that feeds the plants. Organically, you can't feed the plants without feeding the soil. Feed the soil, you feed the world. Now, what you need is a minimum of 3% organic matter, And then you can hold the soil fertile forever, and you reduce your water demand by 10%. At 6 to 8% organic matter, you reduce your water demand by 50%. And at 15% organic matter, you reduce your water demand by 75%. Now, agriculture, in a monoculture sense, industrial agriculture, hardly ever gets beyond 1.5. We need 3% minimum, and then we've got a sustainable world. There can be 50 to 200 tons of life in 1 hectare of soil. The earthworms alone equal, by weight, all the animals above the soil. And they're a small component compared to all the microbes. Feed the soil, feed the world.
Thank you, Geoff. Another question from Tanika, and we're almost finished. Tanika's got a good question, and that is, what career opportunities are there in permaculture once you have your PDC, your Permaculture Design Certificate? What sort of jobs can you do?
Once you get your Permaculture Design Certificate, you're entitled to teach the course. You can legally be a teacher and you won't be challenged. You can also be a designer and consult for other people, help people live a better way with good, sensible design. Well, you could be dealing with people's shit. You could be actually designing waste systems that's saving children's lives. Children get cholera because of these systems not being designed well in places like East Africa. You could be giving people a really meaningful life where they can grow all their food on 10 hours a week's worth of work, and the rest of the time they could be doing something they love to do to make money, because you've reduced their food, you've reduced their travel, you've given them all that beautiful family quality time. In the meantime, you could be doing really cheap little systems like wheelie bin toilets, set up very simply. You could do fancy toilets. You can help people live a better way. That's what it's about, real design.
Thank you, Geoff. Next question, to move right into it, is from Louisa. Louisa's asking if Geoff can talk about sodic soils. Sodic soils are those soils that tend to slump. And also, if he can mention some good native trees to hold the riverbanks together. And I presume that she's talking about Australia when she's asking native.
If you have collapsing soils, sodic soils, you need to introduce rip lines on contour or small swales on contour and plan them out. You have to define the contours of tree lines. Bring those tree lines in so the organic matter starts to add to the root zone area and start to hold it all together. It's all about having free organic matter from trees. Willows, the Salix genus, is one of the best hard-working immigrants in Australia, really, because they don't have a tap root, they have a beautiful hair root, they're easily propagated from cuttings, and worldwide there's a whole culture around willows holding together riverbanks. You can actually pleach willow to willow as well. But then we have things like the river lily-pilly, this beautiful tree here. It's not quite the same root zone as a willow, but densely planted, a lot of our riverine species will also hold the river together.
Okay, second last question from Peter. So Peter is asking, is there circumstances where you would not build a swale? Do they work on all soils and all terrain?
Are swales always necessary, or are there areas they can create harm? Well, if it's too steep, 18 to 20 degrees plus starts to get a little bit too steep for swales, and you might not get the trees established before it might slump with rain. So you want to come below those slopes of 18 to 20 degrees. Now, other places that swales don't necessarily do anything, and that's the really cold climates. You get to latitude 60, away from the equator, there is no evaporation. You hardly need to irrigate. Your growth season's only 90 to 120 days. You don't need swales there because you don't need to rehydrate the soils. And that's it. So, there we go. Great question to end on. Swales, one of the definitive elements of permaculture. All the things I've spoken about here are in the PDC, The online PDC is a massive amount of information, and it supports you with lots of backup information as well that you get to really understand the principles of permaculture design, because that's what we enjoy giving you. We want you to understand how we can make a better, more abundant, peaceful world.
So I had one last question for Geoff, and I said, Geoff, do you know any good way to get rid of the bush turkey from coming into my garden? Because the bush turkey has been creating havoc. Look, what's left of my taro, what's left of my cassava, my yacon, it's all been destroyed. Geoff, have you got any good ideas, mate?
Well, I've heard teddy bears. They don't like teddy bears. So put teddy bears all around the fence. The more and the bigger, the better. And I've heard they don't come. They run away from teddy bears.
If you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. You know that song?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
If you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. If you go down to the woods today, you're in disguise.
For all the bears that ever there was. We can continue it, that's fine. Well, that's about it for all the questions. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. If you'd like to learn more about Geoff Lawton and the Permaculture Institute, there's a link in the description that can take you to a 4-part series masterclass video series, which you will get a lot out of. So, have a nice day, and I'll catch you later. And I'm thinking on my next video, I might see if it works when you use teddy bears.